Hey, first grade, welcome back. Today's story is called A Taxing Time, the Boston Tea Party. This was one of our favorite lessons last year. The students and I had such a great time, and I'm pretty sure that you will too. So let's get started. Our learning objectives for today are to identify the first English settlements in America, describe the Boston Tea Party, demonstrate an understanding of the word goods, describe the Boston Tea Party by examining a picture, and then write a sentence about or act out the Boston Tea Party. Our key vocabulary are goods, harbor, representatives, revolted, and taxes. Now, you probably already know goods and taxes from one of our previous units, but I will remind you just in case you forgot. Goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. At the market, people bring goods such as vegetables from their farms, flowers from their gardens, or other things they made, such as candles for others to buy. Harbor is a protected body of water where ships can be left. Every Saturday, Mary Elena and her father would watch ships come in and out of the harbor. I don't know why I had such a hard time reading that example. Sorry, guys. All right, representatives are people who are chosen to speak or act on behalf of a larger group. Representatives from each class told the principal what changes to the playground their class wanted. So that would be like if I chose one person from our class to go and speak to Miss James about something that first grade really wanted to do. So let's say that we were all in class and we were trying to come up with a field trip that we wanted to go on. And the representative that I would choose one student to be our representative, and they would listen to what everybody said. So they would listen to everyone's ideas, and then they would take the idea that was the most common or the one that most people wanted, and they would share that idea with Miss James. Okay, so they would speak for our class. Revolted means rebelled or rose up against. The kids revolted against their mother, playing with electronics when they weren't allowed. I hope you don't do that. Taxes are the money that people have to pay to a government for services. The government collects taxes on gasoline to help pay for the construction and repair of roads. Let's review what we've already learned. Who remembers the names of the 3 English settlements in North America? We had the Pilgrims in Plymouth. We had Roanoke Island, which was also known as the Lost Colony because they just disappeared and we don't really know what happened to them. And then we also have Jamestown. These were some of the first English settlements in North America. As time passed, more and more English settlers arrived in North America, all up and down the east coast of North America. I almost said North Carolina. They formed more colonies where they started new lives for themselves. So these people who lived in the colonies, where did they come from? Because remember, they weren't originally in North America. They came from somewhere to North America to live in these colonies. Where did they come from? They came from Great Britain or from Europe. Okay. How many different or separate colonies were there? There were 13. Do you remember who governed or controlled or ruled those colonies? Who was in charge of those colonies? Was it the President of the United States? No, we didn't have a President of the United States back then. So who ruled them? Who ruled over all those people? It was the King of Great Britain and Parliament, which was part of their government. Okay. So they ruled those colonies from across the ocean. Okay. When the colonists needed more help to clear additional land for farming, what did they do? Who did they get to help them? They had two different kind of slaves, right? They had slaves that they brought over from Africa, and they didn't give them a choice, and they made them work without paying them, and that's not right. And then they also had indentured slaves, which meant that these people would work for them for a little while for free without being paid. But then after they worked for a certain amount of time, then they could live wherever they wanted, and then they would start to get paid for their work. Okay. Now, I have a challenge for you. And it's also going to be a challenge for me because it's kind of hard to remember. Can you help me remember the names of the 13 colonies? It's going to be tricky. Okay. So let's start from top and go down to the bottom. So we had Massachusetts, we had New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Delaware, Connecticut, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. I'm missing one. Uh-oh, which one did I forget? I'm gonna have to go back and look. Hang on. See, I told you it was gonna be a challenge. I got 12 out of the 13. Pennsylvania. I forgot about Pennsylvania. Whoopsie. All right, so those are the 13. And as we go on for the next couple of weeks talking about all of this, you're going to be able to remember them, okay? But today, I didn't expect you to remember them. I couldn't even remember all of them. Okay, remember our key vocabulary. We had goods, harbor, representatives, revolted, and taxes. I want you to listen carefully to find out about some of the problems that the colonists encountered. And I also want you to find out why the colonists did something drastic when they had the Boston Tea Party. Oh, and look, there are our 13 colonies right there. Okay. So, let's get started. For a long time, many colonists were proud to be British citizens ruled by the King of Great Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British Parliament had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies. So remember, when the colonists came over and settled, they had to have money to do all of that. Right? They had to have money to build these things, to buy the materials that they needed, right? Well, the British government and the King of Great Britain, they paid for all of it, okay? To help pay for these expenses, Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Taxes are extra money people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today we may pay taxes when we buy clothes at a department store, food in a restaurant, or gasoline for the car. Depending on the state where you live, you may have to pay $1 or $2 more for your new shirt than what's listed on the price tag, or a few cents extra for your sandwich than the price that's listed on the menu. But these stores don't get to keep the extra money. They must give the extra money, or taxes, to the government. These days, we vote and elect representatives, or people, to represent us in government. These people make decisions about how to best spend taxes to provide public services that benefit all who live here. The government uses taxes to help pay for things that everybody needs, like schools, public transportation, roads, water and garbage service, police and fire protection, and other public services. But back in the time when the colonies were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted or allowed to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in the British Parliament on the other side of the ocean. So many of the people who lived in the American colonies in the 1700s felt that it was unfair for the British king to ask them to pay taxes. The colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugar, and other things. Because the colonists could not voice their opinions to the British government through representatives, why, they wondered, should they have to pay taxes? It just didn't seem fair to them. So the colonists are upset and they don't think that it's fair that they have to pay taxes when they don't even get an opinion or a voice as to where that money is going to go. Okay, so like it said, here in North Carolina, the people of North Carolina, they get to vote on a representative to be the voice for the people that live in North Carolina. And that person helps make decisions on what the money and the taxes should go to. Okay. So that's why the colonists are so upset, because they still have to pay these taxes and they still have to pay this money, but they don't have any opinion. They don't really have any say in where their money is being used. So they have to pay these taxes, but they don't have a voice on how they can be used or should be used. So that's frustrating. I would be upset too. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry. But it was in the colony of Massachusetts that tempers flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try to keep the peace in Boston, but it didn't help very much. The people in the colony of Massachusetts were really mad about paying these taxes. Then, in 1773, the British Parliament did something that the colonists could not stand. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company only, charging a large tax for that tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay taxes on the tea, one of their favorite drinks. That would be like if you made me pay extra money for my coffee, and then you didn't even let me choose where that extra money got spent. I would be very angry. They began sending shiploads of tea back to Britain and ordering tea from the Dutch Republic instead. The Dutch Republic was the name of the country we now know as the Netherlands. This made the king even angrier. He told them that they could not send any more tea back to Great Britain without paying the tax. Because of this, the colonists of Massachusetts revolted against the British king. They decided that they would not accept the king's decision. Uh-oh, what do you think is going to happen now? Shiploads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston, Massachusetts. A port is a place on the coast where ships load and unload their goods, okay? On a night in December of 1773, a group of men known as the Sons of Liberty planned a most unusual tea party. Smearing their faces with soot, grease, and streaks of red paint, they stuck feathers in their hair. They disguised themselves as the Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time. They made their way down to the harbor. Climbing aboard three British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost the tea and a lot of money. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Can you imagine how much tea they must have dumped into there? That's crazy. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important ports. He told them that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so people had to close their shops. Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce, meaning there wasn't a lot. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? The people of Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king, but other colonists warned them not to act so quickly. Wait a bit, they suggested. It's never a good idea to fight back without cooling off a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a big meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about midway between the farthest New England colonies and the southern colonies. Each colony elected representatives to attend the meeting. So it wasn't possible for all of the colonists to go to that meeting, and so that's why each colony chose one person to speak for them, or a few people to speak for them. It was the first time that representatives from all the colonies, except Georgia, met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some remained loyal or faithful to Great Britain and the king. They were called the Loyalists. After all, they said, we're British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called patriots. Members of the Continental Congress included George Washington from Virginia, a young Army commander who had helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin attended the second meeting of the Continental Congress. He was a Philadelphian known for his ability to get people to work together. Though unable to attend, Thomas Jefferson, known as an excellent writer, was elected as a representative from Virginia. At that first Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a letter, telling him that they wanted to work things out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws or rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws, since we are not able to vote for laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they waited for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and to stop buying goods from Great Britain. At the end of the meeting, the colonists were still split in their opinions about what to do. The Loyalists hoped that the king would grant their request, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The Patriots kept things stirred up, talking about going to war and breaking away from Britain altogether. It certainly was not a calm time. Okay, if you need to hop up and get a wiggle break before we do our comprehension questions and our word work, go ahead and do that and come back. What were taxes and what are taxes and what are they used for? Taxes are extra money paid for goods you buy that the government uses to help pay for public services, such as schools, police and fire department. Oh my goodness. Police and fire protection, water and garbage services, and other things like that. What's a representative? A representative is somebody who is elected to represent a larger group of people in the government. They help the government decide what to spend taxes on. Why did the king and the British Parliament decide to tax the British colonies in America? They wanted to get some money, right? The British Parliament had spent a lot of money trying to help set up and protect the colonies, so they were trying to get some money. How did the British colonists feel about being taxed? So how did the people who settled in these colonies, how did they feel about that? They weren't happy. They were not happy at all. They thought that if they didn't get a say as to the laws and the way that their money was being spent, that they shouldn't have to pay that money. What was the Boston Tea Party? That was when the colonists dumped tea into the Boston Harbor, right? Because the king said, you can't keep sending back this tea without paying. And so the colonists said, okay. And they dumped all the tea in the harbor. Okay. What was the colonists' next plan for solving the problem with the British king? They had a meeting, right? And it was called the First Continental Congress. And they wrote the king a letter saying that they felt like if they were going to have to pay taxes, that they should be able to have a representative or they should be able to make their own laws. So, did the Boston Tea Party fix the problem? No. How do you know that the problem wasn't solved? Because the king was so mad that he closed the port so nobody could exchange goods. Did everybody agree on what should be done? So all the colonists, did they all agree? No. Remember, we had some people who were loyalists who still wanted to be considered British and they wanted to remain loyal to the king. And then there were others who were patriots and they wanted to rule themselves. In the read aloud you heard, King George told the colonists that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. I want you to say the word goods. Goods. Can you whisper it? Goods. Can you clap it out? Goods. There's only one syllable in that one. Goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. The workers unloaded goods from the ship in the harbor. I'm going to list several things. If it's something that can be bought, traded, or sold, I want you to say, that is a good. If it is something that cannot be bought, traded, or sold, I want you to say, that's not a good. All right, clothes. Clothes are goods. Pineapples. Pineapples are goods. The moon. The moon is not a good. What about love? Love is not a good. What about rings? Rings are goods. Alrighty, let's check that we have hit all of our learning objectives for the day. Did we identify the first English settlements in America? Yes, we did. Did we describe the Boston Tea Party? Absolutely. Did we demonstrate an understanding of the word goods? Yes. In a minute, you are going to describe the Boston Tea Party by examining a picture. And then you will also you can choose to write about it or you can act it out, but the Boston Tea Party. And if you go to the next video, it's me acting out the Boston Tea Party. It's what I showed my kids last year. So I hope you like it. I had a lot of fun making it. It's kind of silly though. All right, guys. See you later. Bye.